Hey, what's up guys? Today, I'll show you a horror series, Masters of Horror, Incident on and Off a Mountain Road. Spoiler ahead, watch out and take care. The movie begins on a deserted road at night. A woman named Ellen is driving alone listening to the radio. She fiddles with the radio to switch stations, and she doesn't see that there's another car haphazardly parked in the middle of the road. Ellen's car crashes into the vehicle, causing her to lose consciousness. A flashback reveals her first date with her husband. He was openly honest about his macho worldview and how he believed that strength is the only way to win. Ellen was very much attracted to his brazen personality. The two ended up going to his cabin that night and sleeping together. This was the beginning of their passionate and whirlwind romance that swept Ellen off her feet. He challenged her and inspired her to be better and stronger. And her husband liked that she was sweet and vulnerable like a little bird because he could protect her. In the aftermath of the crash, Ellen wakes up and woozily gets out of her car. She is mostly fine, but she's concerned about the person she hit. She shines a flashlight on the other vehicle, but discovers that there's no one inside. On the passenger seat is a blood-stained jacket. She follows the blood drops down the road and into the cliff by its side. In the darkness, a male figure slowly climbs up the cliff. Ellen thinks it's the driver of the car she hit, and she apologizes for causing the accident. But it turns out to be a hulking man with a pale, monstrous face. He is carrying the driver of the other vehicle. He sees Ellen and throws a knife at her in a split second. Ellen falls on the road, and the killer follows her there. She recovers quickly and dodges his lunges. She runs into the forest by the side of the road and hides in the cover of the trees. Another flashback starts. This time, Ellen and her husband were now a couple. They were jogging in the woods near his cabin, and he told her that in order to overwhelm her attacker, she has to do something unexpected and crazy. Ellen then playfully made her husband chase her until they collapsed on a hill giggling. Her husband then pulled out a ring and proposed to her. At that point, she was still madly in love with this nasty man and could think of no better way to spend the rest of her life. So Ellen said yes. Back in the present, the killer has almost caught up to Ellen in the forest. She crawls through some underbrush with him, managing to get a hold of her legs. She forcefully kicks him in the ass and breaks free. She then grabs a pair of nail scissors and a wooden branch, quickly fashioning a trap for the killer. With all said, Ellen leaves the trap behind and runs her limbs away. When the killer reaches it, he grabs the branch and it causes the nail scissors to hit him in the face. Ellen keeps on running, but soon finds herself with nowhere to go but a scary pit in the middle of the forest. Another flashback shows that Ellen's husband had trained her to fire a gun. At this time, her husband had fallen even deeper into the survivalist lifestyle, and he became paranoid. They barely went out to see other people anymore, except the other obsessed survivalists who feed her husband's delusions. She did not like how controlling he had been lately, and she tried to voice out that he's getting too hung up on the idea that they need to prepare for an earth-shattering crisis. This caused rifts in their marriage, and Ellen began to think something was wrong. In the present, Ellen lays another trap for the killer by cutting off strips from her skirt and tying large branches together. Then she waits behind a tree for the big rabbit to come. But instead of the killer coming forward, it's the other driver. Before Ellen could warn her, she slips down the pit and her leg gets impaled on a tree branch. The killer pops up and triggers Ellen's trap, but it doesn't really deter him. He watches as the driver screams. The killer shushes her. Ellen continues to run deeper into the woods until she comes across a ridge. The killer's cabin is visible, as well as a dozen bodies he had strung up on wooden crosses. Ellen shrieks at the sight of the violated corpses and then loses consciousness. Another memory reveals that the couple's arguments had escalated. Her husband called her weak, and he goaded her into fighting him so she could show him how much she learned from him. But Ellen got fed up with his bullshit, so she told him that she was leaving him. Back to the present, Ellen wakes up inside the killer's house. Her hands are cuffed to a wooden pole, and the bodies of the killer's recent victims are piled around her. They all have no eyes. In the corner is an old man who's also held prisoner by the killer. His hands are cuffed too. He starts babbling to Ellen about how different she seems to be from the other girls who the killer had brought home. The old man appears to be a bit addled and speaks strangely. He tells Ellen the killer seems to really like her, and she could stay with him, and all three of them could be together. The killer goes downstairs and turns on the generator. Police sirens start blaring, and lights flash erratically around the room. He grabs the driver and heaves her screaming on a metal table. The killer uses a drill press to remove both of her eyes, effectively killing her. When the killer disappears again, the old man inexplicably begins singing. He encourages Ellen to sing with him while she's frantically trying to free herself. Speaking in a riddle, he gives her the idea to get the piece of metal embedded on her shoulder. She's successful, and she uses the metal to unlock her handcuffs and get free. But the crazy old man immediately shouts and informs the killer that Ellen is escaping. It turns out he isn't actually cuffed to his chair, insinuating that he has a personal connection to the killer that made him last this long. The killer goes downstairs and attacks Ellen by choking her with a piece of wood. Ellen fights back and manages to climb the stairs to the living room. She sees the desiccated corpse of a baby in a stroller. The killer drops his knife on the floor, and Ellen stealthily yanks it. Using the martial arts skills her husband taught her, she fluidly hits him. She pushes him out of the window with a strong kick. But this isn't the end for the killer yet. He holds on to a blanket hanging out of the window. Ellen looks down at him with a smug expression on her face. She watches him for a few seconds, and then the fabric finally rips, and he falls to his death on the cliff below. Ellen silently puts on a pair of the killer's boots, and also steals a gun from his drawer. She walks outside the house and sees her car parked nearby, probably taken there from the highway by the killer to cover his tracks. She opens the trunk, and inside lies her husband's dead body. The last flashback reveals the truth. One stormy night, her husband became insanely jealous and thought that she was cheating on his hormones. He violently forced himself on her. Afterward, her anger propelled her to choke him to death with his own belt. When the last breath left his body, she cried in grief. The reason she was on that road that night was that she planned on disposing of her husband's body somewhere and starting a new life. Too bad the killer had ruined her night. But this turn of events gave Ellen an even more foolproof idea of how to get rid of her husband's corpse. In the following, Ellen hauls his body back to the cellar and puts him on the table. She carefully presses the drill press to remove his eyes, just like how the killer did earlier. The old man watches everything, and this time he really is tied with a rope. He realizes what she is doing and begrudgingly admires Ellen for her shrewdness. But the second part of her brilliant plan involves shooting the old man with the gun, so there would be no witnesses. She tells him that she's grateful for her husband's brutal lessons, for she wouldn't have survived the night without his wisdom. Then she shoots the old man. She shushes him, just like the killer had shushed the driver that night. She strings up her husband's corpse on a wooden cross, like the killer's other victims. This is all so she can disguise him as just another victim of the deranged killer in the woods. Even if the police find the corpse, they will just think that her husband fell victim to the killer. And on the off chance that the investigation leads to Ellen, she can just say that she and her husband were attacked by the killer and she survived. The movie ends with Ellen getting back in her car and driving down the highway again as the sun slowly rises. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.